بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. أسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهه الكريم. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to continue where we left off in our review. We only have one more section and then we'll move on. Let us start with Al-Fatiha to the soul of Sayyidina Imam Al-Ghazali radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Al-Fatiha. I want to remind you what our teachers said about the works in general, Al-Qutub al-Ghazaliyya, the works of Imam al-Ghazali in general, especially Al-Ihyaa. They said the books of Imam Ghazali will show you, will reveal to you who you are, not who you claim to be. The books of Imam al-Ghazali will reveal to you who you are, not who you claim to be. Right? And I'm sorry to say, in the voice of Sheikh Samir, I am so sorry to say we are a bunch of pretenders, the whole lot of us. And that's not an ill opinion, that's just true. And if we don't realize that, that is our biggest problem. And the only way we will know that is by reading the works of Imam al-Ghazali and the like, and then observing people who actually practice all this stuff we're reading. Then we'll realize how much of pretenders we are. May Allah accept from us pretenders, but we are not what we claim to be. And we have to work on it. And we can't make the excuse, nobody's perfect. Because when we say that, we should realize that's not even in the discussion. Are we perfect? That's not even a discussion at all. Right? We have to be better. And we have to work diligently towards perfection. And not excusing ourselves for imperfection and falling short. We should blame ourselves for that. So to recognize that, you have the works of Imam al-Ghazali and similar works of the people of Allah to realize who you really are, not who you claim to be, and how to become what you should be. You get to know who you really are, not who you claim to be, and how to become what you should be. 3 stages. Know yourself, don't be deluded by yourself, and become the person that Allah wills for you to be. That's a road, that's a journey. And sometimes the biggest block on the path of Allah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is delusion. when the person deludes themselves, right? And that's, as Allah mentioned in the Quran, Ya ayyuhal insanu ma garraka bi rabbika al-kareem. O human being, what has deluded you about your generous Lord? Sometimes delusion is a big problem. Seeing things and other than their reality. Imam Ghazali is going to help us see clearly. And when we see clearly, that's not a bad thing, because now we know what we have to work on. But if we're deluded, the problem is going to be right in front of us and we'll never even work on it. So we reached up to page 23, and let's get to finding out where we have leaks so we can plug them and repair the damage. Now, go ahead.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. The author, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, said, "You should know for certain that the most knowledgeable among the people of any time and the closest to the truth are those who most resemble the companions, and those who know better the way of the predecessors. Therefore, take your deen from them. It is for this reason that Ali ibn Abu Talib, may Allah Ta'ala be well pleased with him, when he was told, 'You have acted differently to so and so,' said, 'The best among us are the ones who follow this deen in a better way.'"
Here, I want you to think of this paragraph, the last section. And this is Imam Ghazali talking in the 6th century, the beginning of the 6th century. He said, "Wa'alam tahqiqan," right? Certainly know that a'lamu ahli zaman, that the most knowledgeable of the people of the time, which is his time, and it applies to our time, and those who are most close to the truth, right? That could be the religious truth, and on a higher level, that could be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are those who most resemble the Sahaba. One of the ways to see what we are capable of in following the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is look at the companions and how they followed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And those who are most knowledgeable and aware of the way of the early Muslims, as Salaf. Learn what they did and how they practice, and take the deen from their practice, right? So none of us have a monopoly on the way of the Salaf, Tariqus Salaf. None of us have a claim to that rightfully, except the one who follows it and knows it well. Every Muslim needs to follow the way of the Salaf. Every Muslim. Why? Because they were best in emulating the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and practicing the religion. And that can't be just by affiliation. It has to be reality in our practice, inwardly and outwardly. The way of the Salaf is an outward practice, an inward state, and an ultimate reality that all of us need to strive for. Every single one of us, right? And that is the advice of Imam al-Ghazali there. Now notice something. Uh, Imam Ghazali was Ash'ari, Shafi'i, Sufi, but he was Salafi, meaning he was firm and dedicated to following the path of as-Salaf. He was Ash'ari, Shafi'i, Sufi, which meant he was Salafi, meaning he was following the way of the Salaf. And he mentioned it right there. All that he mentioned in his book is telling you how to become like the Salaf. In reality, that's what this whole book is about. And if you become like the Salaf, you become excellent in following the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you can look at the Ihyaa as a practical manual of how to be a Salafi in reality. In reality. This is Salafi right there. You want to be Salafi? Do that. You are Salafi. Do that. And we should all strive for that. We should have an excellent relationship between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We should have an excellent relationship between us and the creation. And we should have an excellent relationship between us and ourselves. Threefold. We should have an excellent relationship between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of ibadat, in terms of our acts of worship and our devotional practices. We should have an excellent relationship between us and the rest of the creation in terms of al-adat, our customs and practices. We should have an excellent relationship between us and ourselves in terms of removing al-muhlikat, removing blameworthy characteristics, ruinous characteristics, and adorning ourselves with al-munjiyat, adorning ourselves with praiseworthy and saving characteristics. That's a Salafi. That is the way of the Salaf. And if you study the Salaf, whether it's from the companions or the followers of the companions or the followers of the followers, that was their life. That's what we should be striving for. That should be something that we want to have realization within it. That we become that. May Allah give us the ability, inshallah. Ameen. So let's start with section number 7 in talking about the intellect and its nobility.
The intellect and its eminence. Elucidation of the eminence of the intellect is not something which requires a great deal of effort, especially when the eminence of knowledge has been made plain by means of the intellect, and the latter is the source and foundation of knowledge, which is in relation to it, like the fruits are to the tree. Scholars have, however, differed with regard to their definition of the intellect.
So knowledge is going to be based on the strength and excellence of one's intellect, right? It's a fruit of the intellect, right?
Scholars have, however, differed with regard to their definition of the intellect and its essence, and most have overlooked the fact that this term is given to different notions, and that it is this that lies at the root of their differences. The truth, which reveals the solution to these differences, is that the intellect is a common term which designates 4 notions. The first is an attribute.
So 4 notions meaning 4 meanings, right? 4 meanings which relate to realities related to the intellect.
The first is an attribute which distinguishes the human beings from the beast. This consists of that which gives us a disposition towards learning theoretical sciences and subtle intellectual disciplines. It is to this that Al-Harith al-Muhasibi referred when he said in his definition of the intellect, excuse me, it is an instinctive faculty Ghariza, which gives one the perception to grasp the theoretical sciences. It is like a light which is thrown in the heart and with which one has the disposition to understand things.
Here, let's take Al-Harith al-Muhasibi. He died in the year 243. He was the Sheikh of Junaid al-Baghdadi, right? He was the Sheikh of Junaid al-Baghdadi. Junaid al-Baghdadi, he was, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the leader of the Sufis. And he was a master of tasawwuf and the spiritual path. And he was praised by all. He's praised by all. And he was Sufi. No one of any merit in Islam criticized Sayyiduna Junaid al-Baghdadi. He got acceptance by all. Al-Harith al-Muhasibi was his sheikh. He said about the intellect, it is that faculty by which we perceive sciences that involve us investigating and thinking and pondering about them, right? So it is like a light that is cast into the heart. And by way of it, you're able to perceive matters, perceive things. And it is the distinguishing factor that separates you from an animal. Other animals. So when we use our intellects, we won't be like animals. So when you see us, and you're going to see Imam al-Ghazali in the Ihyaa is going to tell us how we act like animals and what kind of animals by our characteristics. He's going to point them out. We'll learn them later. He's going to point out, this is the characteristics of this animal. This is the characteristics of this animal. So you should use your intellect to distinguish you from those animals by removing those characteristics. You'll perceive that these are animalistic behaviors, and we need to remove them. Some of us are walking dogs, walking pigs, walking snakes in human form. And none of us like to be described as a dog. None of us like to be described as a pig. None of us like to be described as a snake. So remove those characteristics and attributes of dogs, pigs, and snakes from ourselves. So we're not ascribed with that. Imam Ghazali is going to show us why you are a dog or a pig or a snake. He's going to point it out. And then you see it in yourself. These are the sifat, these are the attributes and characteristics of dogs, of pigs, of snakes, of cows. And then you observe yourself. Do I have those? Use your intellect to distinguish and perceive these realities and remove them. Right? Imam Ghazali is going to show us that. Now, go ahead.
The second notion designates those different types of knowledge which come into existence in the person of the discerning child, like the possibility of the things that are possible, and the impossibility of the things that are absurd, mustahilat, or such as the knowledge that two are greater than one, and that the same person cannot be in two different places at the same time.
And this knowledge is acquired through the intellect. You acquire those things. When a child reaches the age of at-tamyiz, right? Mental discrimination, they start to distinguish between things. and that is acquired. It gets better and better and better and better. And likewise is the more we learn, that faculty will become stronger, right? And part of that is seeking knowledge once we have this ability. Now,
The third designates the knowledge acquired from experiencing different situations. For the one who has gained wisdom from experience and was refined by the trials of life is usually described as possessing an intellect, and the person who has not had any experience in life is described as stupid.
right. And you need to learn from your experiences in life, right? The one who experiences things and they don't use their intellect to extract wisdoms and lessons from that is a fool, stupid, rabi, right? And don't be stupid. Allah takes you through things, gives you trials and tests so that you acquire lessons and wisdom. Use your intellect to extract those things from lessons. Sometimes we spend too much time complaining about the lesson and the trial and the test and not concentrating on the wisdom and the lesson from the trial or the test. Me and Imam Naeem, that was one thing we were talking, right? And we was talking about relationships, right? And he joked about bad marriages. Yeah, I think he mentioned it on the round table too, right? We had this discussion before, right? And we all who have experienced divorce, right, may look back on it and from our side think how miserable that may have been. And usually we blame somebody else. It's the other person's fault. Man, that sister was a mess. That brother ain't no good. You know us, right? Never our fault. Never, never, never. It's never our fault. Never. I didn't have anything to do with it. It was just her. It was just him. You know, that's our go-to line. Rarely do you find somebody to say, you know what? I see why they don't want to be with me no more. They rarely do that. I know why she couldn't put up with me. I know why he went somewhere else. But we never take time to see, even if you weren't at fault, what was Allah trying to show you through that trial, through that test, through that experience? It's not about the experiences itself. It's something you're supposed to learn from it. There's a wisdom to extract. So even if you were all right, which is hardly or rarely the case, but let's, for the sake of just saying you're right, let's say you're all right. What was Allah trying to teach you out of that? Use your intellect to extract that. Because, as the pious says, calamities, they don't come to destroy you. They come to elevate you. Hardship, shada'id, masa'ib, calamities, they don't come to destroy you. They come to elevate you. Only when you use the intellect to extract the lesson, right? It's extremely important. Most of us don't extract the lesson, and you know what happens when we don't extract the lesson, we don't find the wisdom, we repeat the cycle. We end up doing the same thing because we never learned. We didn't learn. Why we didn't learn? We didn't employ our intellect, which Imam Ghazali is mentioning as this third point, right? You go through all these different states and situations, right? And you extract knowledges and wisdoms from it. That's why you go through it. It's something to extract. It's something you should learn from it. It produces ulum, not one. Look, he said the third thing is, read the first line of that third point, that third meaning, please.
The third designates the knowledge acquired from experiencing different situations.
All right, so not knowledge. That's plural. Ulum, knowledges, sciences that are benefited from experiencing in different circumstances. It's not just one knowledge. It could be in general, and that means plural. Ulum, many things you should extract from the stuff you go through. You know, one thing I learned, I speak personally, so no one else has to speak for themselves. You know what I learned through going through trials in marriage? You know what I learned? I think it's my biggest lesson among them. I learned that I wasn't attentive enough to a woman's emotional needs. That's what I think that's the biggest lesson I learned through going through a divorce. I wasn't attentive enough to a woman's emotional needs. To be honest, I was oblivious to a woman's emotional needs. I learned that lesson. And to this day, I'm still working on that. And that's not an easy lesson to learn and do something about, because it takes a lot of work, because women are complicated creatures, especially at the emotional level. That's some deep stuff. And if you fail to realize that, you will never be successful in a marriage. If you fail to realize that, you will never be successful in a marriage. And I was a miserable failure at that. I'm still a miserable failure. I'm just learning a little bit better. But I'm serious. That's hard. That's difficult. Especially when none of us have been trained how to do it. Nobody sat down and said, listen, son, women are very complicated. You have to pay attention to that which you can't see. You have to pay attention to that which is not being said. It is the most important. Huh? Pay attention to what you can't see and pay attention to what is not being said. That is the most important. That's difficult. No one told you how to do that. And no one walked you through it. So you crash every time. But the crash, you should learn what not to do. But you got to employ the intellect to do that. That's what Imam Ghazali is talking about. I'm giving you this practically in our lives, with your children, with everything. I'm just speaking something when we were talking about marriage. And yeah, it's very important. And then to deepen that level, you got to have a concern and a deep-seated love, which in our Islamic practices, it comes loving believers, because there's no courting and all that stuff. So you ain't getting to fall in love with that individual. You should fall in love with the believer altogether. And that love will translate to that particular individual, which would be your spouse, right? So you have a general love for believers, which is intense. And how intense is that love? لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. None of you have complete faith until you love for your fellow Muslim what you love for yourself. That's how intense that is. You don't have kamalul iman. Your iman is not perfected until you love for the believer what you love for yourself. Now that's the stat. That's the status for every believer. Now you're married for your spouse. That's intensified as to an individual directly. That's my wife. That's my husband. And because of that love I have for you, I'm going to be concerned and considerate of all your matters, even over mine. Yeah, it sounds easy, but that's not easy to do. But we have to do it. It's not an easy job. No one said it was. But we need classes just on that. I recommend all of you. This is my recommendation. Don't be judgmental, number one. You won't follow if you're judgmental. But there is, to me, one of the most important shows that I see on social media, that I see. I'm not saying there are not others. But this one, to me, for us in our community, in our interaction with each other, for me, this is one of the most important shows we have. And I recommend all of you follow. Excuse me. This show, I think, is extremely important to our community on the social level, on our dealings. Because on that show, especially with women, and for men need to watch that show. Because may Allah reward half your deen show too, but it's different from what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this show. When I watch this show and I tune in, not all the time, but when I have a time, I think it's tonight. What time does this show come on? Oh, Sabri is there. What time does this show come on? What I see when I watch this show is the women teaching us and giving us a rare inside view of that emotional thing I was talking about. I see it clearly because I'm conscious of it now. Before, I'd be like a bunch of women that's crying. I'm sorry, I'll be honest. Before, I would look at this bunch of women just crying. Get over it. But when I touch to my feminine side, no, I'm joking. I see a lot of lessons. I'm like, man, mashallah. I hope we are learning from this. Yeah, the women are a way of healing from trauma and all that, but the men need to be learning. Look what we're doing to our women. Look at them. They're putting it out for us. Are we learning something? They're teaching us, but are we listening? That takes a lot to do that. And I see it. I see it. And sometimes I want to cry looking at it. I'm like, man, we got to get ourselves together. Look what we're doing to our women. Because I want to give you something deep. Those women are the one who are raising our children. And if they're damaged, right, wrong, or indifferent, we know everyone has their side of the story. But even if we're not all of what we want to make ourselves innocent, we should consider there's a lesson to learn from this. There's a lesson. Seriously. Like, it's one of my favorite shows on social media. I guess because it's my problem. So I guess I'm like, wow, thanks. May Allah reward you. I needed this. Right? Because most women are not going to be that open, even with their spouses. They're not. They're not going to do it. Not that raw emotion like that. Most women are protecting themselves from being hurt, so they hide that emotion, even though it's there. For somebody to just put that stuff out like that, they need to be applauded. Seriously. It takes a lot. That's not easy. And if we be honest with ourselves, we know it. Brothers know it, because if our wives and our daughters and our mothers would really tell us their pain, we might not do some of the stuff we do. But they hide it. They suffer in silence. And we don't even realize what we're doing. I'm telling you, we don't. I think about it all the time. The damage we've done unconsciously. They may think we're doing it on purpose. Nah, we're oblivious of what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about. Not a clue. You think it's intentional. No, I don't mean to hurt you. That would be the last thing on my mind. I just don't know what I'm doing. I don't even realize you're hurting. So shows like that, with such raw emotion, that's why I say you can't be judgmental. If you're judgmental, you're going to dismiss everything. You ain't grabbing no lessons. You're going to look at it, a bunch of women crying. And that is not what's happening. Actually, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving you some deep insight that you need to listen to. I mean, that's just my feeling. So it's therapy without going to therapy for those who are afraid of therapy. But you got to use your intellect to extract. So you can practice this by watching that show. As for the Half Your Deen show, that is a little bit, it's not as emotional. It's more raw, realistic, practical. Imam Naim and Samira are just raw. But I'm talking about emotion. That's a whole different level. That, they say there's levels to this stuff. That Dope Muslim Woman podcast is a whole nother level. A whole nother level. Right? A whole nother level. But you watch it yourself. I recommend you look at it. I think it'll be beneficial. If you don't benefit, you don't. But I would suggest, for the well-being of our relationships, especially in the Black community, men and women, Muslims, and anyone could benefit, but I'm saying especially Muslims, man, I would suggest you listen. And you judge it for yourself, right? But I suggest you listen. I didn't get to number 4. I guess we'll wait till tomorrow, right? Can we hit number 4 real quick, or I'm running over too much?
Sure.
All right, let's hit number 4 and then we'll pause.
The fourth designates the development of that instinctive faculty to a point whereby one knows the consequences of things and suppresses the desire which invites one to an immediate delight. Once this force is developed, the person who possesses it is called intelligent, in that his indulging and withholding depend on pondering upon consequences, and not on the immediate desire. This characteristic is also specific to the human being and distinguishes him from other animals. Thus, the first two designations are obtained by natural disposition, thob, while the last two are by acquisition.
Here, the other thing is the fourth point. When you realize the end result of what you do, that's extremely important. And it relates to number 3, right? But you start to think of things on another level. What is the end result of all what I'm doing? Right? Right. What's the end result of all this? What's going to be the outcome of what I'm doing? And I think if we get to this level, right, sometimes it feels good for the moment, right? When we look at the end result of a thing, from that side, intellectually, not from the side of temporary pleasure, right? Imam Ghazali, he called it ash-shahwatul ajila, right? Now, let's look at the end result of this. I know it feels good right now, but what's going to happen at the end when it's all said and done? What am I getting out of this? What's going to be the result? And here, what I say this, let's look at the way we've been dealing with relationships. If we ask ourselves in general, I'm not talking about specific cases, in general, it hasn't worked well for us if we think about it, right? It hasn't. The way we've treated our women hasn't been too good. That's true. I'll give you an example. We got temporary enjoyment to the extent that we got a bunch of women who can't find a husband because the men all jacked up because of temporary enjoyment. A lot of our brothers don't have it together because they ruined it enjoying themselves temporarily. Right? So now we have so many women who can't find suitable spouses or a spouse at all, period. So they end up settling because of the emotional damage of that for something that's not good for them. And we have a role in that. But that's when we look at the end result of our actions. And that's something to think about. I have a partner, right? We used to run the streets together, right? He said to me one day, we was doing feeding in the projects, in the big projects. We was feeding food. We used to feed every single day, me and him, just me and him. We would go on the projects every day and knock on doors and give full cooked meals every single day, right? Which is one day I hope to return, but that stuff got burdensome. It was hard, but we did it for a while. Every single day we would go and full cooked meals for families in the projects. Um, and he said to me one day, he said, they're doing us a favor by accepting this food from us. Because many of them are in their condition because of what we did in the past. I was like, dang, that's deep. I said, that's some heavy thinking, bro. Look what he said. He said, they're doing us a favor by accepting these meals, the food, because many of them are in the conditions they're in because what we did in the past. Because we were in those same projects screwing things up, and some of them have never recovered. 30 years later, we're doing good things, but some of them have generational problems because of our bad choices. That was so heavy to me. I was like, whew. That's using your intellect to think about the end result of your deeds. That's some deep stuff. And reader, if you gotta go ahead. I want to make a few points about that, because sometimes we don't talk to ourselves, and we need to have real talk. As men, listen, brothers, stop trying to shift stuff to the women. We can deal with that, but let's deal with us, because we are the leaders of the home. We are the khulafa. We are the successors on the earth, mainly the men. That's our responsibility. We are the amirs. We are the leaders, supposed to be at least, right? So let's take our responsibility. Many of us, I'm not saying all of us, we know ourselves. And if we sit around in our own circles, we know us. Many of us were abusive to women. Womenizers, mess with many different women, cheating, all kinds of crap we did. Right? But did we ever think the damage we were doing to those women when we were living that lifestyle? What it did to their self-worth? And we were just thinking about, I'm enjoying myself. Think about that. Think about it. Some of us will sit around and talk about how many women we slept with. And we don't be having remorse. In fact, we take it as a badge of honor. Even though we know it, we'll say it's haram, but inside, I was the man. Right? I was the man. You know us. Come on, be honest. Right? So I know women that That brother I told you was my partner, he's older than me. He said something when, because we be mixing up with people. Somebody said about a girl, she was a fun girl. And he looked at him, he said, and you was a fun Negro. He didn't use that word, he used another word. I was like, deep. He said, man, she's a fun girl. He said, and you a fun Negro. He didn't use Negro, he used another word. Did we ever think about that? She's a fun girl, which was to disdain her and belittle her and devalue her. But what the hell was you doing that? What kind of dude was you? And what was the outcome of men like you making her a fun girl? What's the outcome of that? And how did that outcome affect her life and the lives she's going to touch, like children? We don't be thinking. We didn't even think that far. I was just having fun. And we bring that into the deen. I'm going to get a couple wives, but we ain't thinking about being responsible men most of the time, building community and raising. We think about our nafs. If we be honest, I'm not saying every individual, but if you hear the context of having more than one wife, a lot of that stuff is desire. It has nothing to do with responsibility and accountability and leadership and building. None of that. Desires. It's halal. Desires are halal, not recommended. Read Al-Ghazali. Desires are halal, not recommended. A big difference. Need you to focus on what I just said. I'm going to put that up again. I want you to ponder on that. This is a lesson from the Ihyaa. Desires are halal, not recommended. And to be engaged in them in abundance is blameworthy. I want you to think about that. Because we're talking in context of elevation, spiritual rank. So following our desires is not something we should be doing, even though the desire may not be haram. Do you understand what I'm saying? So how many things are we doing from the side of desire, not from the side of really benefiting and improving and building? There's a big difference between the two. Here's what Imam Ghazali is talking about. That's what the Prophet ﷺ, that's how he lived. And now keep that in context from where a lot of us come from in this society. The society itself devalues women, even in the face of making them look important. Keep in mind, the society which we live in devalues women, even putting them in a way that looks like we're supporting them, devalues them. One time, me and Sheikh Shamir was driving. We were on the highway. And there was a tire billboard. And it had a woman, like, I don't know, she was dressed seductively, either with no clothes, with a bathing suit or a little bit of clothes, like seductive. And Sheikh looked at the billboard. He said, she is cheaper than the tires. Now, as a billboard, I see this stuff all the time, right? He said, she's cheaper than the tires. I said, deep. The way he said that, he said, the way they had this billboard, he said, she is cheaper than the tires, and she shouldn't be cheaper than the tires. But the aspect of devaluing the woman is there. That's what he's pointing to. Right? And that's something we should consider. Right? And most of us would not accept for our daughters or our mothers to be treated by anyone the way we have treated somebody else's mother and daughter. None of us would accept. And that's a bar that the Prophet ﷺ used. If we be honest, the way we have, I'm not saying we do it now, and I hope we don't, but realistically, some of us are. We wouldn't accept that our mother or our daughter be treated by a man the way we have treated some women. We wouldn't accept. If we be honest, we wouldn't accept at all. I know I wouldn't. Even if my mother or daughter was a willing participant, I wouldn't accept that you do that. I'll give you an example of that from my own side. Like all of us, we go through changes in life. And I remember one of my family members was going through a woman, drug addiction. And she lived close to the projects. And I remember going in the projects and telling the dudes who were selling drugs, if you sell her some drugs, I'm coming to see you. I'm letting you know now. If I found out you sold her some drugs, I'm coming to see you. And the people in that neighborhood know what that meant. And they wouldn't sell her drugs. Nah, I'm not doing that. Nope. She still found her way, but I did whatever I could do to make it difficult. That was for my own. But what about others who are not your own, who are going through the same thing? And this is in the past I'm talking about. But I'm just showing you that spirit that we have. Somebody do that to my daughter, I'm coming to see him. If my mom's husband or boyfriend do that to my mom, I'm going to see him. But what about you? But what about you? And this is just real stuff that we deal with. It ain't like we speak it in the past like we all pious people. Nah, this is reality that we face on the ground. And that's why you look at that Dope Muslim Woman podcast, you see that women are still feeling that. They feeling the effects of stuff that happened 10, 15 years ago. You can see it in the faces. The pain that they went through. I see it all the time. I'm an imam. I see women that are damaged from some of the stuff we did. Damage. I see it. I'm an imam. And other imams know it. When are we going to be accountable and realize that we got a lot of reform to do? Because it's not sufficient just to say, I don't do that no more. Okay, you don't do that no more, but what about all the damage you caused? Where's your reparations? Right? Where's the reparations for all the damage you done? That now that you Sheikh al-Islam and you don't do that no more. What about all that damage you did? Something to think about. And since we're talking about the intellect, that's the purpose of it. Imam Ghazali is talking about the intellect. He gave you different stages. Some's natural, some's acquired. Okay, let's put this stuff to work in reality. It's for us to become something. It's not just to listen to say, I read Al-Ghazali. What did you do with it? How did you apply it to that which is real on the ground that you're dealing with every day? That's Sufism. That is to become something. But you got to deal with reality. And these are things that we should think about. Who says that Allah overlooked all the stuff we done? Who got that guarantee? Tasawwuf tells us, the religion tells us that we should always be worried and in a state of fear that Allah doesn't accept from us. As the pious said, all people are dead and ruined except the learned. And all the learned are ruined except those who practice what they know. And all those who practice what they know are ruined except the sincere. And the sincere is in fear that their deeds will not be accepted and they don't know their ending. This is what we're learning. So even though I don't do it no more, do I'm sure that Allah is going to overlook all that damage I did to that sister? Am I sure about that? Oh, or she just don't count. Right? What about her? What about the spiritual damage that was done through my physical activity? That she don't even understand. Hence, she can't heal because she doesn't even understand what happened to her. So we have work to do. And when we look at our communities, all of that is that fourth point. The end result of our temporary pleasures. And we look in our community, we see it. We see it. But we got to use our intellects to start examining this stuff. And it's a lot of work. It's not going to happen overnight. Not one lecture. This got to be an ongoing healing process and reformation and training and purifying and cleansing. That's a journey. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. But we need to realize that we have to do the work. And we have to be honest with ourselves right? In order to do the work, you got to be honest, right? You got to really assess what's really going on. And that's what Imam Ghazali is giving us, right? That's what he's giving us. So I know we're looking at, this stuff is deep. And if we take it right, it's transforming. And that's what it's supposed to be. It's transforming us from the level of animals to the level of humans to spiritual beings. But it's stages. This is our Islam. This is what they tell us is bid'ah. Sufism, bid'ah. This is what they're talking about. These matters that's going to make us change is really what we're working with, that we really need. This is the reality of Sufism. It's amali, it's practical. It's practical. An-nafsul lawama. An-nafsul lawama. That is, an-nafsul lawama. The self-accusing ego. But now I'm talking about the brothers, but the women, that's what they're doing on that thing. They're doing the same thing. That's what they're doing at Dope Muslim Women podcast. But I just don't think we're engaging them, right? And I think we do need to. They open the door, but we don't engage like we should, right? Because I think we're superficial sometimes in our examination of things, right? We're too quick to judgment without really thinking about it. All right. I mean, these are my thoughts within thoughts. This stuff is a lot. That's why I review. That's why, because this is a lot of work. And it's something that's going to take years and years of work. Like, and don't think this is going to be overnight. Great masters have took decades to do what we're talking about. And there are some things I want to share with you, but we have to build up to where we can accept realities. And it takes time. But there are people who actually did what we're talking about. And they were masters at it. These knowers of Allah, they did what the stuff we're talking about. They actually did it. But it takes time, inshallah. May Allah give us time, and may Allah allow us to begin the process, because we need community healing as a whole. We need community healing. You know, And trust me, it's a conversation that uh, needs to be embarked upon. And I'm definitely not the one to do it because I'm a guilty party. So I need to listen to others, right? But I do realize that, you know, I have a role in the helping us heal, right? Right? As a whole. And all of us have a role because we all played a role, whether major or minor. We in the movie, right? You're still in the movie. Don't act like you're not in the movie. You in the movie. We're all co-conspirators to our own destruction. Can someone put that up, please? Type that real quick. We are all co-conspirators toward our own destruction. That's something we should think about. We are all co-conspirators towards our own destruction. Yeah, that's reality, man. And the sooner we realize that, the better off we'll be. All conspirators ain't at the same level, right? Let me use this word towards, right? That's when we start thinking as a family, right? When we start thinking as a family, we'll realize that. I didn't do as much as he did, I know, but you still did something, right? And accept your role so you can get some points off. Accept your responsibility in the conspiracy, right? You might not have been the head of the conspiracy, but you played a role, right? And we always say there's a conspiracy to destroy us. I know, what's our role in that? I agree. There is a conspiracy to destroy our people. What's our role in helping further that conspiracy? All right, I love y'all. Inshallah, may Allah make it easy for all of us. And these are just my thoughts. They don't have to all be right. Some of them can be wrong. Ignore the wrong ones and benefit from the right ones and make a change. Barakallahu bikum. Inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow morning. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.